Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Time-Crossed Lovers in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 6, History Lesson. Byleth spent the day hanging around the encampment, listening to the soldiers talk. They never even glanced at her as she wandered around. It isn't difficult to overhear interesting rumors and solders complaining about new scouting routes. Byleth had hoped to listen in on something more substantial, but that's not something she has control over. She has considered attempting to take a look at some of the files the officers keep, but that would be too much of a risk at the moment. The information might not be useful, and if she was caught, the consequences would be dire. Maybe she should find a Luis or Geralt and get some sparring done instead. Byleth has energy to burn and could use some exercise. Suthies has been tight-lipped lately. Byleth wants to give her friend space, but the silence and secrets are starting to grate on her. Suthies has let some information slip, like how Nemesis was never given anything, but not much else. Byleth just wants to know what's going on. Good morning, Byleth. She looked up and spotted a Luis approaching her. Byleth had been surprised by how much he'd taken to the mercenary lifestyle. He seemed to enjoy the traveling and being with her father again, though. He also liked spending time with her, which Byleth found odd given her reputation. He'd been like that when she'd been at the officers' academy as well, so Byleth isn't sure why she was surprised. Hello, Luis. Maybe she should get that spar in after all. Or maybe see if he was up for some fishing. Provided he didn't scare the fish away with his shouting, they might be able to have a decent dinner. When Byleth went to bed, she found herself with Suthies at the throne again. Her friend had been silent all day, which was not normal whatsoever. Byleth had been worried. I think we need to talk. Byleth just needs to be delicate with how she handles things. Suthies is entitled to her privacy and Byleth should respect that. Yes, I suppose we do. Suthies sounded so dejected. I've left you waiting long enough, and it's past the point of being reasonable, given the situation we've found ourselves in. It's just so difficult to start. I want to tell you everything, but Byleth doesn't like seeing her usually bubbly friend so upset. Take your time, it doesn't need to all come out at once. As eager as Byleth was for answers, she did not want to hurt Suthies to get them. It's fine. I need to do this. I fear I will never be truly ready, but you deserve to know. I believe that you in fact, need to know the full story. Suthies gets up from her throne and descends the stairs. The two of them each take a seat and look at each other for a moment. I do not know the reasoning for it, but much of the doctrine the Church of Ceros teaches is false, Suthies began. She pauses for a moment. I suppose the best way to go about this is to tell it all in chronological order. Suthies gave a strained laugh. I do have power over time after all. Byleth did not like the look on her friend's face. She would prefer a frown over a false smile. When I first came to Fodlan, I helped many people. Teaching them, healing them, giving them gifts. Some were grateful, some were greedy, such is the way of humans. Eventually I went on to have children of my own. I had a large family. From me there eventually spawned a whole race of people, the Nabateans. They were very similar to humans, many differences being superficial. They look physically like humans except they had green hair and pointed ears. Byleth couldn't help but think of her mother's natural hair color, and her own new one. There were other differences as well. The biggest were that Nabateans could live for centuries without visually aging, and they were much sturdier than a regular human. They were not immortal, but it would take to do them any lasting harm. Another difference was that each Nabatean had their own crest. Many could also transform into various kinds of dragons. Rhea could turn into a dragon, and they did fight a sacred beast in that temple at Lake Tutates. Could he have been a dragon too? Despite these differences, humans and Nabateans were so similar that they could even have children together. Most Nabateans made their home in Xanadu. A fond smile briefly flashed on Suthies' face. It was there that I built a home, which I am certain the architecture of Gareg Mach Monastery was based on, to live in. No wonder Suthies thought Xanadu was so familiar. She'd lived there. Eventually those who became greedy from the boons of my gifts started demanding more. Except they didn't just want my knowledge anymore. They were envious of my power and the power that came naturally to my Nabatean descendants. Her hands tightened into fists. What I could give them would never be enough, so they began attacking. Typical of the greedy, Byleth had seen it time and again while working as a mercenary. Those with power always wanted more. She's seen many clients from the nobility try to avoid paying her father for their services, usually spouting nonsense about how working for them was an honor and should be payment enough. Meanwhile they'd hired them to do something like hunt down bandits because they never bothered to have their knights investigate the problem before it got out of hand. That's actually how Alel became such a pit of fire. They attacked and a barrier I created deflected the blast. Eventually, their attacks became so frequent and powerful that the entire world was brought to ruin. I used what power I had left to heal the damage but fell into a deep sleep after. Byleth couldn't help but remember her own 5-year nap. Suthis shook her head. So much happened while I was resting. I was brought to Zonada to recover under the protection of the Nabateans. It was while I was asleep that Nemesis came. Suthis turned to look at Byleth. I do not know if Nemesis was always working with the Agarthans or if they allied after, but the so-called King of Liberation broke into my resting place and killed me. What? He then stole my crest so he could become a god and waged war with the Agarthans backing him. Suthis was trembling. I think I might also know how we came to be connected. What? Why was Suthis changing the subject? Suthis carried on with her new topic. I suspect that Rhea placed the crest stone that contains the crest of flames into your body to replace your heart. It would explain why your emotions were so stunted until I first awoke and why you have the crest of flames in the first place. My heart beats for the both of us. Byleth put her hand on Suthis's shoulder in what she hoped was a comforting gesture. You can stop if you need to. I suspect I might need to, but not for my sake. The rest of this sorry tale may well be too much for you and I fear you might not be able to handle the information. Before Byleth could interrupt, Suthis continued. Not because you are not strong, but because the information is truly that devastating. What could be so terrible? If you are able to continue, I want to know. I am tired of always being in the dark. Her father keeps everything from her, Rhea did too, no one will ever just tell her anything. As you wish. Suthis took a deep breath. Another thing the church has been lying about is where crests came from. They and their relic weapons were not gifts I gave anyone. That night Dimitri dreams of the throne again. Though this time, when he notices his location, Suthis and Byleth are sitting on the steps and Suthis is asleep in Byleth's lap. It is so good to see his beloved again. It had been far too long since he had the pleasure. It was only when Dimitri walked closer to them that he noticed their tear-stained faces. Byleth, what's wrong? Did something happen at the Imperial camp? Did he need to rescue her? Everything will be fine, Dimitri, you should go. Byleth was frantically wiping her face. Dimitri rushes to her side and stopped her. How could I ever do such a thing? Byleth looked down at the sleeping goddess. Thank you for worrying, but we will be fine. Suthis just shared some knowledge that got to us both. There is nothing you need to worry about. Can you tell me what the knowledge was? If I could share the burden with you, it might be easier to carry. He just wanted to help her. Byleth deserved only happiness. She should never have to cry. No. Dimitri takes one of her hands. Please, beloved, I just wish to help you. I can't tell you. You will hate yourself. Byleth shook her head as she began to tear up. Please don't ask me to cause that. I don't want that for you. What are you talking about? What could Suthis have told Byleth that would make her cry and him hate himself? Tell him, Suthis interrupted. The goddess hadn't moved, but her eyes were cracked open. He deserves to know. It's better that he hears it now than from someone else. The goddess then got up and on shaky legs and made her way back to the throne. Byleth made to go after her. Suthis, are you okay? I'd like a moment of solitude. You and I can continue our discussion later. As she sat back down, Byleth looked exhausted. Dimitri made himself comfortable next to her and took her hand again, giving it a light squeeze. Please tell me what's wrong. Byleth sighed. The church is either wrong or lying about some very important things. She ran her free hand through her hair. The biggest among them being the origin of crests. What do you mean? Didn't the goddess give them to Nemesis and the 10 elites? Though he supposes the goddess would know better than the church. Sothis never granted crests to anyone. If the goddess did not bestow them, how did we get them? His beloved hesitated. Are you sure you want to know? It's not good. She looked so upset, and Dmitri couldn't just leave her like this. No matter what the knowledge did to him, he would not leave her alone with whatever it was. He wanted to share burdens with her, not abandon her to them. Dmitri moved a little closer to Byleth. Yes, I am sure. Byleth's face became carefully blank. Dmitri hated when she did that. She was not an emotionless demon, she was kind and compassionate. Byleth shouldn't have to hide that part of herself. It started with Nemesis. He found Sothis while she was in a death-like sleep. She was defenseless and vulnerable. So, he killed her mortal body. That can't be true. Nemesis eventually walked a dark path, but he did not start there. He took things from her which gave him her crest and the sword of the Creator. Byleth, despite her blank face, looked uncomfortable. This was all happening at Xanadu, the place Sothis' family, the Nabateans, lived. Once that was done, he took the sword and, Byleth covered her mouth and looked away. Xanadu, the Red Canyon. Dmitri had always thought the name odd, as there was no red in the Red Canyon. He didn't know people had lived there, or that the goddess even had a family. What could have happened? Oh. Red like blood. Dmitri felt sick. There was a massacre, a genocide. Byleth's voice was devoid of emotion. Only Siros got away. I don't know if the elites knew what was happening or not, but they were at least nearby. So, they did what Nemesis did to get crests and heroes' relics of their own. How? Dmitri had a horrible feeling that he knew where this was going. I need to know how. Could his ancestor really have? To get a Nabatean's crest, you drink their blood. To get their crest stone, you take their heart. Byleth takes a breath. To make a weapon to go with the rest, you take their bones. She won't look at him. Dmitri cannot blame her. He's descendant from a monster. His esteemed ancestor, someone many praised and revered, was in reality so far beyond heinous he didn't even know an accurate word. What did that make him and the others who could trace their lineage back to one of the 10 elites? His ancestor was complicit in a massacre. People were slaughtered to give him and the others power. Dmitri always knew he was a wretch, but to think his whole family line was so horribly tainted. Maitri. Why hadn't Sothis killed him when they first met? How could Byleth stand to be near him? Dim. He's a beast. A monster who is benefiting from the slaughter of the goddess and her people. He deserved those 5 years he spent living little better than a feral animal. His whole line is cursed. Dmitri. He is jolted back into awareness as Byleth begins shaking him. This is why I didn't want to tell you. Tears are running down her face. Dmitri shouldn't be happy to see them, but he is. He's despicable. Byleth is hurting, but here he is, happy that she's no longer hiding behind her mask. Whatever negative thoughts you're thinking, you need to stop them right now. Even though Byleth is not shaking him anymore, her hands have not left his shoulders. What your ancestor did, what he may or may not have known, that is not on you. You are not responsible for the choices of others, especially when said choice was made before you were born. While that makes logical sense, I'm still benefiting from it. My crest, the thing that is supposed to mark my noble heritage, what my culture says makes me special, is the result of a genocide. And that's not on you. Be upset that it happened, that is a very reasonable reaction, but do not blame yourself for it. We don't even know how many, if any, of the 10 elites truly knew what they were doing. Byleth's tears have stopped, but she still looks so unhappy. Dmitri is likely causing some of her current anguish. He cannot have that. Maybe a change of subject will be a welcome distraction for them both. He deserves to languish in his misery and horror, but Byleth doesn't. The last time we spoke, I gave you a warning about the threat Cornelia might pose towards you. Byleth gives him a confused look. Yes, I remember. Our last conversation ended so abruptly I never got a chance to ask you about that. An odd way to refer to his blunder in propriety. I'd heard that she was holding Thirdyad hostage. Were you okay? You were being held as well. Confusion is preferable to sadness. Nothing was done to me. I was held more by fear and indecisiveness than anything else. He doesn't want her to worry about him. I know I already gave you this warning, but Cornelia, and her cohorts, which unfortunately include some Faerghus lords, are likely after you. Hopefully, they will not pose a threat to you for much longer. You'll be attacking them soon. It was not a question. Of course, she could guess what his plans were. She was the one who taught him strategy after all. Dmitri gently removes her hands from his shoulders and holds them in his own. Byleth looks startled at the action, perhaps she'd forgotten she was still holding him. That is our current plan. The details still need to be hammered out, but Dmitri hopes his army will be marching soon. How are things faring for you in the Imperial Army's camp, beloved? Byleth winces. Things are fine. As a mercenary I am usually below everyone's notice, but Suthies and I have been on guard since you delivered your warning. Geralt's been on edge since I gave him a warning, but that might also be because we've been losing so much. Byleth sighed. News is getting harder to come by, but the rumor mill is still strong. I've seen Ferdinand and Caspar a few times. I'm hoping to find an opportunity to send them your way. That is so like Byleth, always worrying about others over herself. Would you consider leaving the Imperial camp? We could work so well together, like we used to. Byleth's face hardened and she attempted to take her hands from his. No, Dmitri, I will not leave my father. Dmitri tightened his grip. And I would never ask you to. I know we would need to work out a few plans, but if we handle the situation well, we might find a way to make your father amendable to a new employer. Even if that happens, even if I did join the Kingdom Army, what you want, what your clear aim is, will not take place. We cannot be together romantically again. Byleth's face is blank again. If I were to join your army, it would only ever be as a mercenary. A disposable soldier in the eyes of everyone. No, that is not how it will be. Dmitri would never allow it. Byleth woke up in tears. She is grateful that she'd managed to get her hands on a private tent. It would not have been good if anyone had seen her like this. She is supposed to be the emotionless Ashen Demon, she needs to act like it. Between Suthi's history lesson and seeing Dmitri, she feels like a mess. Dmitri has only joined her at the throne a few times, but those occasions along with when they dream of a shared memory are always hard. Byleth isn't even sure what her emotions are anymore. Was what she felt for him still love, or was it something else? Either way, giving into it now will just mean more heartbreak later. Everything will work itself out. Suthi's voice was more subdued than normal. I'm not so sure I believe you. People always talk about how falling in love is supposed to be this great and wonderful thing. For all that he missed her, Geralt never said a negative thing about marrying her mother. Why couldn't Byleth experience something like that? Why did her love have to be so doomed and painful? It would be so much easier if Dmitri would just see reason, but he seemed determined to be persistent in his endeavors to reunite them. All while disregarding everything she had to say on the matter. You said it yourself at the beginning of all this, that boy was always persistent. He loves you, for him that's more than enough reason to fight for what he wants. Chapter 7, Planning Ahead. As his army marches towards Dominic lands, Dmitri is uneasy about holding Eredbar. Just looking at the lance made him want to retch, the mere thought of using it in battle. He had to keep it with him though, everyone will ask questions if he discards it. How could he even begin to explain things to them? Dmitri fully understands why Byleth did not wish to tell him its true horrific origins. Just knowing about the lie is eating away at him. He can't imagine telling someone about it. Everyone deserves to know, but he needs to deal with this situation delicately. Dmitri can easily imagine the appalled reactions of his crest-bearing friends, especially Sylvain and Ingrid, who have had to deal with so much because of theirs. He'd had a lot to think about since they began to travel to deal with Cornelia and the Western Lords. Before he makes any moves, Dmitri wants more information. Talking with Lady Rhea will hopefully get him some answers. She will ideally know if the Church has been lying or if time had simply distorted the facts. Dmitri had long believed that the reliance and reverence crests were granted was wrong. He'd taken pains to integrate both the nobility and commoners alike into his forces. Talented people were talented regardless of their place of birth. Children of nobility, likewise, shouldn't be passed over or disregarded simply because they lacked a crest. What Byleth told him only heightened these feelings. Once the war is over, Dmitri wants to have the hero's relics put to rest. He will not allow the remains of the fallen to be used in such a way. If the Nabateans were anything like Byleth and Suthies, then there truly wasn't much difference between them and humans. They still felt, lived, and cared for others. They were not animals to be hunted down. In recognition of that, he would do what he could to respect them. They were now amongst the dead he needed to avenge. When the battle is won, Dmitri feels relief at Cornelia's death, as it means Byleth is just a little safer. He's still incredibly worried about her, but the number of people who want to hurt his beloved has decreased, so at least there's that. If only Byleth would come to him. Dmitri must consider what Byleth said about the two of them when he last saw her. What she's been saying about their relationship since they first reunited. He was naive to believe things would be easy, he just needs to figure out how to alter things to improve Byleth's standing. He doesn't care that she lacks a title, but others certainly will. Geralt was the captain of the Knights of Syros, maybe they could use that. Or perhaps if Geralt's mercenaries join his army and perform well, a title or position could be granted to him or Byleth. His beloved is also a master tactician, something his army lacks. If she retakes her old position, she could gain prestige that way. She would certainly be good enough at the job to gain notoriety. Dmitri supposes they could leverage the fact that Byleth had the major crest of flames, but he's trying to lessen the importance of crests, so that argument would not be ideal to use. It would probably cause setbacks with his plans beyond his nuptials. Dmitri just needs to get Byleth to join his army. Once everyone meets her, he knows they will all see how brilliant and wonderful she is. They can weather this storm together. Byleth just needs to agree to join him. When they are together, Dmitri knows they can get through anything. Seeing Edelgard when he goes to help defend Arianrhod was difficult. It was the first time they had been in the same place since he'd remembered everything. She wasn't dead, so maybe they could have talked. Dmitri tried to reach out to Edelgard but was unsuccessful. Again. At least this time, she didn't throw her dagger at him. Sometimes he still feels phantom pains in his shoulder from that. Though, he did meet the man Edelgard claimed was behind his father's death. Thales appeared to be an Agarthan, but he couldn't recall ever meeting the man before. Byleth or Suthies would probably know for certain if they saw him, but that was unlikely to happen any time soon. It shames him that Shay had to all but carry him off the battlefield. Dmitri still wants answers from Edelgard. He just hopes that she is safe from Thales and whatever he was trying to accomplish. Hey kid. Byleth was fishing when her father approached her. Have you gotten many bites? Geralt sat down next to her with his own pole. She shook her head. The fish don't seem to want any of my bait today. They sat in silence for a bit before Geralt started talking again. I think it might be best to make yourself scarce for a while. Byleth turned to look at her father. Why would he want to send her away? I don't like the looks you've been getting recently, but if we all leave the higher-ups in Adrestia we'll send someone after us. Geralt sighed. I'd prefer if we stay out of trouble, not cause more. Besides, the army will be at a standstill for who knows how many months, because of whatever is happening with the government. It shouldn't seem too out of place that I'm sending you off. That does make sense. Byleth had even sent Dmitri a report about the army's orders to remain where they were for multiple moons. But she did not like this. I don't want you gone for too long. You know my contacts, make your way to Leicester and find some work. He took some of her bait and put it on his fishing hook. Leave in a day or so, then meet me in 5 moons at Remire village. How does that sound? I can do that. She'll be worried about him, Eloise, and the others, but if it eases her father's mind she will go. Byleth begins packing that night. Holding off on going won't make it any easier. Now she just needs to figure out what route to take. Perhaps we could make a stop at Xanadu? If possible, I'd like to see it now that I know what it is. Are you sure that is a safe idea? Xanadu was close to Garreg Mach, which was under the control of the Empire. I'm not opposed to going, I'm just worried about the potential consequences. Their last private trip to the Red Canyon did not go so well. You are technically working for Adrestia right now, it should be fine. If something does happen, we can always use the Divine Pulse. I suppose. Xanadu wasn't the only place they could investigate. There was also Shambhala. Going there would be dangerous. What would be the point? It's not like we could get too close without tipping them off to the fact that we know where those cockroaches are hiding. We could gather information, now is as good a time as any. Especially since we'll be in Alliance lands anyway. It makes sense to Byleth. If they are going to be away from the fighting, she wants to do something useful. I can just make sure to take a job that will get us in or near Goneril territory. Byleth also wants to know what the Agarthans are planning. Byleth knows that Dimitri and Edelgard fought at Arianrod, but something happened. The rumors are all over the place and the Emperor was rushed back to Inver. Edelgard would never have allowed that. She has no proof, but it seems like something the Agarthans would have a hand in. Dimitri would not do anything to hurt Edelgard too badly, would he? At the end of the other war, he wanted to reach out to her. Byleth supposes it could just be internal strife within the nobility of Adrestia. She distinctly remembers Ferdinand having nothing flattering to say about his father. Any noble not loyal to Edelgard could be causing trouble. We must consider that outside forces are starting to make more overt moves. But why would the Agarthans choose to do so now? Why not later, once all the armies involved have taken more damage? No one's lost momentum yet. Byleth remembers them being very entrenched in Adrestia's military last time, but that does not appear to be the case now. As much as Byleth does think they are involved, what are they gaining from their interference and why now? Wouldn't it be easier to just sit back and let the people of Fodlan fight each other to exhaustion? That way they could swoop in and annihilate them all without much resistance. Perhaps they simply saw an opportunity to strike. Suthies sounded thoughtful. Or they felt pressured to move after the boy killed Cornelia, that is if she truly was an Agarthan. Without her, they require other means to attack Faerghus. Both are possible. Byleth doesn't like that they don't have any real clues about what is going on. If what everyone is saying is true, then Duke Aegir is probably a pawn the Agarthans could control. There's another pawn we have to worry about. You mean Shay? It still makes Byleth uneasy to remember Suthies' actions when the goddess finally woke up. I'm not convinced he's one of their pawns. From what I've gathered he has no idea where his power came from. I'm not even sure he knows who the Agarthans are. I care not. Suthies was not happy. He's using power they created. Power that was used to slaughter an untold number of people, just because the Agarthans saw them as lesser. I understand what you are saying, but there are no buts. He is using a power that came from people who massacred my children and descendants, who desecrated their remains. Suthies sound close to tears again. That was happening a lot lately. And there's the fact that he wants to kill you. That was a good point. Byleth wasn't too pleased about that herself. Dimitri would never allow that to happen. He was annoyingly protective like that. As long as Shay works for him, we shouldn't be in too much danger on that front. I suppose, I am sorry for getting so heated. When I think about all that happened, I just feel so powerless. My children needed me, and I wasn't there. Worse than that, my crest and very bones were used to murder them. I just don't want to lose you too. I appreciate that. I cannot imagine how it must feel to know all your children are dead. I keenly remember the pain of losing my father. It is not quite the same, but Byleth does understand. About that, I am not sure if they all are. There's tentative excitement in her voice. Siros survived the massacre at Xanadu and there are those in my family who did not dwell there. Oh. All the saints of the Church of Siros bear names I recognize. Suthies was silent for a moment before continuing. Additionally, I believe the Archbishop looks uncannily like Siros, though I would have to see her again to be certain. It has been so long since we were in her presence that I cannot be sure. It would explain why Rhea knew she could put my creststone in you. That was a lot to take in. Why do you think Lady Rhea put your creststone in me? It has been bothering Byleth. What reason would the archbishop have to put the crest stone of the goddess into a baby? I am unsure. There could be a number of reasons. Some good, others less pleasant. Suthis sighed. I fear we'd need to ask to truly find out. Byleth had a feeling that would be the case. Dmitri doesn't like how stationary he's had to be. His wounds shouldn't be taking so long to heal. Mercedes has healed him more than once now and he's been resting. It's also annoying how people keep taking his work away from him. If he's going to be on bed rest for a little while, why shouldn't Dmitri be able to keep up with the seemingly ever-growing mountains of paperwork waiting for him? Someone even convinced Dida to stop bringing the papers to him. He's had to resort to bribing various young squires with candy to bring him the documents. Dmitri counts himself as lucky that Byleth's reports are still being brought straight to him. The most recent one has him on edge, not helped by the fact that it was so short. Army, ordered, not, move, many, moons. Why would Edelgard order her army to stay where they were for the foreseeable future? What are you doing, Bor? Felix was glaring at him. Not an uncommon occurrence, but instead of it being directed at Dmitri, the Duke's gaze was locked on the paper in his hands. I am trying to work. Why won't they just let him? It's not like Dmitri is trying to get out of bed anymore. Felix's glare only intensifies. What part of resting do you not understand? The part where I'm not allowed to do anything. Reading and signing my name do not require any exertion on my part. Dmitri cannot stand lying in bed while everyone else is working hard to move the army further into Empire lands. Yeah, well, this might be your lucky day. Felix crossed his arms. We've hit a bit of a snag and require the king to make a decision. What happened? Is everyone all right? Nothing's wrong, and Mercedes said letting you walk around for a few minutes might do you some good, so let's go. Felix still looked annoyed, but that was his default expression. Under Felix's watchful eye, Dmitri got up on shaky legs. If nothing is wrong, then what decision do you need me to make? They began slowly walking through the camp. Felix nodded in the direction they were walking. Do you see that river up ahead? Yes. It's too deep to cross and going around it could take up a lot of time and would make resupplying difficult. Felix shook his head. Unless we loot any villages we come across. The mere idea put a sour taste in Dmitri's mouth. In light of all that we need to figure out what to do. That is where you come in, Bor. Dmitri nods. He'd need to see the river and surrounding area before he could make a decision. Has anyone offered up any ideas? Annette suggested building a bridge, but that could take who knows how many moons. Sylvain recommended we just find a shallow area and cross there. Dmitri had a look around the river and the maps they had of the area and decided they should go with Annette's proposal and build a bridge. While it would halt their army for a time, the fact that the Imperial army was likewise stationary soothed his worries. Are you sure this is the best course of action? Sylvain was looking at the maps with him. It wouldn't take us that long to find a safer place to cross. While we could do that, Sylvain, it could cause us problems in the future. Ingrid pointed at where the map indicated they could cross. We don't know for a fact that this is still a good place to go. This map isn't newly made, and a number of natural occurrences could have made the river deeper. Dmitri nodded in agreement. Even if the map is accurate, we must also keep supply lines in mind. While I have no problems with our forces taking the remaining supplies and weapons from the Imperial troops we encounter, I will not condone pillaging. We will leave the citizens be as much as possible. If they attack us, we can certainly defend ourselves, but nothing further. He will not sink to the levels Edelgard has. The people do not deserve the bloody massacre she so believes is necessary. Change is all well and good, but the people need to be ready for it, not to be forced into it. If we have a bridge here, we will more easily be able to get new supplies. There is a very good chance that it will save time in the long run. Dmitri wants to make sure his army has every advantage it can. I agree, Your Majesty. Ingrid bowed. It will also give our forces time to rest and train. It feels like we've been continuously marching since the war began. I guess I could get behind a break. Sylvain leaned against the table. Ingrid shook her head. Of course, you could. Chapter 8, Afternoon Tea. Once Dmitri had made his decision about building a bridge, he was sent back to his tent. He wasn't too happy about that, but no one would listen to his protests. He got the distinct feeling Felix and Dida were contemplating carrying him back to his room when he gave in. His tent just felt so empty. Dmitri wasn't allowed to do anything. He wanted to be useful, to be helpful. Instead, Dmitri was trapped in his tent, without any means of getting work done. It grated at him, the inactivity, the silence. What kind of king could he be if he wasn't acting to help his people? His thoughts turn as he climbs back into his bed. He'd managed to save the image on the seal of Bylith's last letter. Dmitri retrieved it from his bedside table and ran his thumb over the flower-like design. He could still clearly remember the ring she gave him. Dmitri couldn't remember ever being happier. It was such a selfish desire for a king to have, but he wants her to give him the ring again. Bylith had told him it was a token from her father, so it was theoretically possible, but given Bylith's thoughts on their relationship, such a thing was a long way off. Maybe he'd feel better about all this if Bylith was here. She always found a way to help him feel productive and included. She'd probably be here reading reports and keeping him company. It's also possible that he just misses his beloved. If she misses him even half as much as he longs for her, then something must be done. They cannot keep going like this. It's been too long since he's seen Bylith on the battlefield, and the last time he really saw her in a calmer environment was when they stumbled upon each other in Duskar. It's difficult to not think about Bylith before he tries to sleep. While they have begun to taper off, when he does dream it is of his memories of her. He knows they are just distorted memories, but wretch that he is, he cannot help but get lost in them. He just wants to be with her again. Dmitri also tended to have an easier time falling asleep when she was near. Before, when they were on the march, the two of them would have their tents or bedrolls close to each other's. If Bylith was part of his army, his nights might be more restful. He shifts to a new position in hopes of finally sleeping. It is then that Dmitri sees a glint of light by the entrance of his tent. He made sure his face was hidden by the blanket and silently grabbed the knife he kept at the other side for the bed, dropping the seal in its place. Hopefully, the shadows filling his tent would obscure his movements, or at least make it appear as though he was just shifting in his sleep. The flap of his tent was lifted and someone crept in. Dmitri could not make out any of the figure's features in the dark, but the glint he saw looked to be from armor. As the figure, likely an assassin, gets closer, Dmitri lunges out of his bed. The assassin shrieked in alarm and pain, as he stabbed them in the side. Provided a healer was found quickly, the wound should be non-fatal and non-debilitating. He wanted to know who sent an assassin after him. The commotion in his tent quickly attracted attention. Dmitri could hear shouting from outside. Hopefully, someone would get here soon. He wasn't sure how long he could hold his assailant down without accidentally causing more damage. Felix and Sylvain are still interrogating the soldier who tried to attack you, Your Majesty. Rodrigue was pacing around the fire Annette had made for them. However, it seems he is one of our soldiers and has been involved in numerous campaigns. Ash looked stricken. I am so sorry, Your Majesty, I don't know how he got past the guards we had posted. It's fine, Ash, I was not harmed, and we rooted out a concealed enemy. Truthfully, Dmitri couldn't complain. He caught the assassin without getting injured and he was able to do something useful. Still, to think there was an enemy hidden within our ranks, for so long. Ingrid shook her head. It makes me worried that there might be more. Dmitri could see the point, especially since he had his own spy in the Imperial camp. A heavy silence hung in the air until Mercedes and Didu approached them. I've taken a look at the assassin, said Mercedes. He might have some scarring, but that should be it. When I left, he was still a little groggy from the blood loss, so I'm not sure how long it will be until Sylvain and Felix will get any useful information from him. Didu approached Dmitri and bowed deeply. I apologize, Your Majesty. You assailant should never have gotten anywhere near you. Dmitri waved him off. Everything is all right, Didu. All things considered, what happened was the best-case scenario. He'd prefer to survive an attack unscathed, than hear that someone else was hurt. Regardless of what the assassin may tell us, we have an important decision to make. Everyone looked at Rodrigue. His Majesty was attacked once, We would be fools to assume that it won't happen again. The best course of action would be to increase patrols around the camp and maybe post more guards. It would restrict their movements a bit, but it was the only plan Dmitri could think of. Rodrigue shook his head. While that is a good idea, I fear that will not be enough. Annette looked up in confusion. What do you mean? It might be best to send His Majesty back to Fhirdiad. At Dmitri's surprised look, Rodrigue sighed. Until we know that there are no more assassins or spies amongst our troops, it will not be safe for you to be here. We are in the midst of a war, of course it's not safe here. Dmitri is no longer a child, he does not need to be sent away for his safety. I must agree with the idea. Ingrid at least looked apologetic. Perhaps if you just left until the bridge was almost completed. You are supposed to be resting anyway. Everyone nodded in agreement, and despite his protests, Dmitri was being sent home for a few moons or so. Don't worry. Ash was beaming at him. As soon as we know when the bridge will be finished, we'll send word to you. Dmitri was still worried. The next morning Dmitri and a battalion of soldiers departed for Fhirdiad. Didu had wanted to join them, and while Dmitri would have enjoyed his company, he convinced his friend to remain. Horses still shied away from Didu, and he would be more useful in helping sweep the camp for more spies. He tries to keep it to himself, but Dmitri is in a foul mood as they travel. The soldiers are just following orders, they do not deserve his ire. He just feels so useless. Thankfully, their first night on the road, Dmitri has little trouble falling asleep. He has another dream of Byleth, and it is so wonderful to see her. He just can't stop looking at her. It's like all his worries and stresses are repelled by her mere presence. They are in Byleth's old dorm room, having tea together. She's chuckling at something, and the sight is mesmerizing. He reaches out to place his hand over hers and they both jolt at the warmth. She's not a dream then. It's disheartening to watch the happiness in her eyes turn into sadness as the realization dawns on her as well. Byleth leans back in her chair, though she does not look relaxed. This is actually decent timing, I have news to share with you and I won't be able to send a report. That worried Dmitri. Is something wrong? Have you been hurt? The Imperial and Kingdom armies haven't met on the battlefield. Could someone have attacked her while he wasn't there to protect her? Nothing is wrong with me, Dmitri, please calm down. It is then that Dmitri noticed he'd shattered the teacup he was holding. That did explain why his hand felt wet. He immediately scrambled to grab a rag to mop up the spilt tea. My father is feeling weary of the attention I'm getting from the other soldiers and is sending me off to Leicester to find some work. Byleth shrugged. With the Adrestian army not marching, it's unlikely I'll miss much. My army will not be marching either. We've stopped to build a bridge to help with supply routes. Byleth doesn't need to know about the assassination attempt, it would only worry her. Byleth tilted her head to the side. Is that the only reason? Dmitri felt himself flush and rubbed the back of his neck. Truthfully, I sustained injuries during the siege at Arianrod when I fought Edelgard and then someone who I believe to be an Agarthan. At his beloved's worried look, he hastily continued. It was nothing too serious and I am not really injured anymore, but I am not taking as much care of myself as the others would like. As a result, I'm currently on my way back to Fhirdiad. Byleth still looks worried. Are any of them with you? No, Didu wanted to join me, but he was needed elsewhere. Will you be traveling with any of the other members of your mercenary band? It would probably be easier to find work if she wasn't alone. No, Geralt doesn't want to risk being accused of desertion, so it will just be me. Dmitri did not like the sound of that. Any number of things could happen. The Agarthans could attack her, bandits could attack her, many things could hurt her while she was alone. No one would know if something had happened. Are you sure that is wise? Dmitri just wanted her to be safe. I can take care of myself. Byleth doesn't need people worrying over her safety. Dmitri's concerned look only deepened. I am well aware of how skilled you are, but something could still happen. As powerful as you are not invincible. He reached for her hand again. I am just worried that something could happen, and no one would be around to help you. He does have a point. I should still be fine, it's not like I'll be completely alone. Suthies was with her, and while Byleth had been trying to avoid using it, she also has the divine pulse. And what does the goddess have to say about your plans? Dimitri began to pile up the shattered porcelain of his teacup. Sothis has no objections. Where was he going with this? I think she's excited about seeing more than just the camp. That ought to be nice for her. Dimitri finished gathering up all the pieces of his cup and took them to the trash. Instead of returning, he stopped to examine her old bulletin board. You did so much, back when you were my professor and tactician. He traces a finger over one of the papers. I think we all took you for granted. You handled all sorts of requests, made sure our weapons were in good condition, helped us prepare for any class examinations we were going for. What was he doing? It was my job. It was her responsibility to look after her students. If she didn't, especially after the war broke out, they could have died. You could say the same thing about Professors Manuela and Hanneman. Dimitri smirked. I didn't see them running around returning lost items. Byleth shook her head. They had things to do after hours, unlike me. Manuela was working in the infirmary and Hanneman had his crest research. It seems like an unfair comparison to her. Still, you always made time for us. You were always there when we needed you. That's not true. There were plenty of times where she didn't act enough. The fact that she spent 5 years asleep when Dimitri in particular needed her, stood out in her mind. Dimitri walked over and kneeled in front of her. If you are referring to the 5 years you were sleeping, please don't. That was not a choice you made. What is your point, Dimitri? His actions were putting her on edge. He smiled at her, before retaking his seat. I simply wish to point out how good of a friend you were to all of us. His smile faded. It truly is a shame that I am the only one who can remember. There's no use getting upset by it, it's not like we can change that fact. As much as Byleth misses all her old friends, she cannot alter what happened. Not even Sothis can do that. I apologize for souring the mood. Dimitri shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I just wish to get across how important you were to everyone. While we cannot make everyone remember you, that does not mean new bonds cannot be forged and new memories can still be made. If this is a roundabout way of asking me to meet you somewhere instead of going to Leicester, my answer is no. Byleth wishes he would stop asking for her to go to him. She has made her thoughts on the subject clear and would like them to be respected. Dimitri chuckled. That was not my intention at all. Byleth did not care for the look in his eyes. Then what is your intention? Just to make conversation. His smirk returned. It is so rare that we get the opportunity, and this location makes me think of when I was still a student. Another teacup appeared in front of him, and he poured himself more tea. Have you decided the route you will be taking as you travel? Not completely, but Sothis asked that we stop by Xanadu. Byleth doesn't think they'll find anything, but it could be worth a look. Dimitri beamed at her. Perfect, I will meet you there then. The room distorted a bit and Dimitri was gone. In his absence, Byleth found herself slipping back to Sothis's throne. What just happened? How did he? I am not sure, but it seems the boy is more devious than we gave him credit for. He was after our destination the entire time. How could she not have noticed? Dimitri gave up on worrying about her being alone much too quickly. I was not expecting that either. Sothis sounded bewildered. Clearly the boy is more persistent than even you gave him credit for. How could I have just told him where we were going? You know, Sothis began, there are ways around the situation we find ourselves in. You never told him when we would be at Xanadu. We could always choose not to linger, or simply not go at all. Byleth shook her head. No, you said you wanted us to look around your old home. Besides, Xanadu is technically in Adrestian-controlled territory. I'll be worried about Dimitri getting caught if we don't wait for him. Knowing him, he'd probably find a way to travel alone as well. The irony of her situation was not lost on Byleth. Sothis began cackling. The irony, the near hypocritical irony. Byleth glared at her friend. The situations are very different. I am fine, Dimitri is a king, and an injured one at that. There should be no trouble for me to travel alone, Dimitri is a different story. I suppose, the two of you though, what is the expression? Like peas in a pod? You are surprisingly similar with your protective streaks. Suthies continued laughing. This will be an amusing trip to bear witness to. Chapter 9, A Romantic Getaway. It doesn't take Byleth and Suthies long to reach Xanadu on horseback, and they spend a day exploring the canyon. I'm not sure what you expect to find. Byleth can't even find ruins to investigate. It's been centuries. I don't think any buildings survived the test of time. I'm not sure what I'm hoping to see. Suthies sighed. We best be careful though. The last time we did this we were attacked and required the assistance of your students. If being here is too difficult, we don't need to stay. Byleth doesn't like hearing the sadness in Suthies' voice. If we wait by the entrance, I'm sure Dimitri will be able to find us. I appreciate your concern, Byleth, but I am fine. I'd like us to explore for a little longer. Byleth walks the length of the canyon several times before they see anything. Or more accurately hear something. Is that growling? Suthies said slowly. Byleth turns towards the noise and sees a giant wolf coming at them. This really is just like last time. Byleth unsheaths her sword. At least there's only one of them. It shouldn't take long at all to dispatch it. True, it might even run away before you can kill it. Now wouldn't that be something? Byleth readies a fire spell to attack the giant wolf before it gets close and nails it in the head. When it lunged at her, Byleth dodged and swung her blade at the giant wolf's leg. It didn't take long for her to destroy the beast's shields. One more good hit should do it. After that I think it might be best to wait somewhere else for the boy to arrive. That sounds like a good plan to me. Byleth dodged another oncoming blow. Giant wolves usually roam in packs, and I don't want to do this again. Before Byleth could strike with her sword, a javelin slammed into the giant wolf's side, impaling it. The beast thrashed a bit before it finally died. Beloved, are you okay? Oh, Dimitri is here. Byleth turned to look towards the entrance of the canyon and saw Dimitri running towards her. Did it hurt you? Do you need anything? I'm uninjured, she said in exasperation. I thank you for your help, but I could have handled that on my own. It only required one more hit and it was just one giant wolf. While Byleth appreciates the concern, she is fully capable of defending herself. As he neared, Dimitri slowed down. I know, I am sorry for interfering. He looked bashful. I just saw you in danger and panicked. The last time you came here alone there was more than just one giant wolf, and I'm afraid I acted without thinking. All things considered, his reaction was not an unfounded one. If Byleth had seen someone she cared about in trouble, she would likely do something similar. Byleth looked around, but luckily did not see any more monsters in the vicinity. When she turned back to Dimitri, she noticed he was still staring at her with wide eyes. Is something wrong? Byleth had already assured him that she wasn't hurt. A little winded maybe, but not hurt. Dimitri did not look away. Nothing is wrong, it's been so long since I've actually seen you. It seems I cannot bring myself to look away. Oh. Byleth quickly turns back towards where her battle had just taken place, so he won't see her blush. Do you think your javelin survived that throw? It hit the beast pretty hard. I am not sure. Dimitri sounded embarrassed. My crest activated while I was throwing it. As Dimitri went to check in his javelin, Byleth noticed what he was wearing. It was his standard armor. Why would he be wearing his finely made, obviously expensive, armor when he knew they needed to keep a low profile? Why, just why? I do not know. Suthies started giggling. I would be willing to bet that he snuck away from his guards to come here without bothering to really prepare. That or he ordered them to go ahead and booked it in another direction. Byleth smacked her hand on her forehead. It probably hadn't even occurred to him that his armor was conspicuous. Anyone who sees him will know that he is some level of wealthy. Suthies started cackling. That was not helpful. Byleth does not see the humor in the situation. She knew this excursion would be challenging with Dimitri tagging along, but she hadn't been expecting this. Byleth, Dimitri called to her, the javelin is fine. It appears to have a few more throws left in it. He was smiling at her. Why was he like this? Kings are supposed to be smart, aren't they? So, why is hers so naive? Dmitri, he winced at her harsh tone. Why are you wearing your regular armor? He just looked confused at her question. Apologies, but I'm not sure I understand your question. Is there something wrong with my armor? I assure you that it is sturdy and in good condition. That was not the issue here. How could one person be so frustrating? Byleth can feel a headache building behind her eyes. You are aware of what we will be doing on this trip, correct? Of course. Dmitri was smiling at her again. We will be traveling to Leicester, doing some mercenary work to cover your tracks, and doing what investigating we can of the Agarthans' home. Dmitri scratched the back of his head. I think you said its name was Shamhala. So, he does know the plan. That's good. How can he not see the problem? Byleth takes a, hopefully, calming breath. Getting angry at his ridiculousness will not help. While I do not doubt your armor is of fine quality, that is the problem. Before he can question her, Byleth continues. If our aim is to pass you off as a mercenary, we will have some issues. Anyone who sees you will know that you are wealthy. Dmitri looks down at his armor. While it isn't unheard of for a rich client to give mercenaries they wish to reward fine armor or weapons, Byleth said, you have too much. Our aim is to go about unnoticed, but you will attract attention everywhere we go. Dmitri promptly looks embarrassed. Oh, I hadn't considered that. Of course he hadn't. It's fine. We can figure something out. They could probably buy him some cheaper looking armor and store his current set somewhere. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was all Byleth could think of. She started making her way back towards the canyon's entrance. There was no point in lingering now. How did you even get here without being spotted by Imperial soldiers? Your armor doesn't exactly hide your region of origin. Or his high status. Dmitri reached out to steady her, as Byleth climbed over some rubble. I suppose I was lucky. I never came across any soldiers. He was smiling at her again. Truthfully, I've been doing my best to remain out of sight. Why? Despite being on more stable ground now, Dmitri kept his hand on the small of her back. Well, technically speaking, I am supposed to be in Fhirdiad right now. I had to order my retinue to go on ahead of me before I could come here. Ha! I knew it. Suthies is very wise. Thank you. You do realize, king or not, you will get in a lot of trouble when you return, right? Dmitri chuckles. A small price to pay to spend time with you. Byleth doesn't know how to respond to that. She just hopes he doesn't notice the redness of her cheeks. Who knew the boy was such a sweet talker? Byleth really doesn't need this right now. Did you find what you were looking for in the canyon? Asked Dmitri. I'd imagine you were in there for a while given the time of day it is. Byleth can practically feel Suthies deflate. Unfortunately, we couldn't find anything. There wasn't much there for Suthies to recognize. All that they were able to accomplish was increasing the number of divine pulses Byleth could do, like the last time Suthies insisted they visit Xanadu. Dimitri's hand rubs her back in comfort. I am sorry to hear that. Begrudgingly, Byleth can feel herself relaxing. It's not your fault. Finding something was a long shot anyway. Hopefully the rest of this trip would be more fruitful. Perhaps as we travel, we might stumble upon other things the goddess recognizes. Byleth hadn't considered that. Maybe Dmitri being here wasn't such an inherently bad thing after all. Byleth froze when they reached the entrance of the canyon. Dimitri's horse was tied up next to hers. It was also wearing fine armor. She takes it back, Dmitri accompanying her was a terrible idea. Traveling from Xanadu to Leicester was not a quick journey. As they moved in the direction of Goneril territory, Byleth kept them off the beaten path. Until they could find a way to make it easier for Dmitri to blend into the background, she wanted as few people as possible to see them. They could store some of his and his horse's armor in their packs, and once they got close to a town, she could probably get him something cheaper to wear. That would at least not make it obvious that he was of some prominence. I truly am sorry for causing problems as soon as we reunited, said Dmitri. It never even occurred to me that my armor would be such a problem. I realize it's a bit ostentatious, but I didn't think it would be that much of an issue. At least he's apologetic for the trouble he is causing us. It's fine, Byleth sighed. We just need to be discreet until we can find you something else to wear. They would have had to be careful while in Empire-occupied territory anyway. Do you know which roads we should be taking? Dmitri had his horse speed up a bit so they could ride side by side. I looked at a few maps before I departed, but given that I don't know Shamhala's exact location, I couldn't ascertain that for myself. Byleth grabbed a map from her pack and brought her horse closer to Dimitri's. While the main roads might be quicker and safer, I'd prefer to avoid them. She ran her finger along the back roads. By doing so, we will hopefully better avoid detection and have an improved opportunity to find something of the Agarthans. Dmitri nodded in agreement. They do like to hide in the shadows. We best get going then. Byleth kicked her horse's sides to get it to speed up. We have to be back in 5 moons after all. The next few days of traveling were interesting. Byleth hadn't imagined that camping would pose such issues, but she was wrong. Dmitri wasn't good at most survival techniques, save hunting. How is that possible? He lived like a feral animal for 5 years. I do not know, but it is utterly hilarious to watch him completely fail at starting campfires. Strange, since he seems to like them so much. I am sorry, beloved. Byleth turned and saw that Dmitri had bent yet another fishing hook while trying to put bait on it for her. He looked so dejected over something that was rather easy to fix. It was a little adorable. It's fine. Give me a moment and I'll show you how to do it again. When they arrived at a small village, Byleth had Dmitri wait in the forest while she went to find the blacksmith. Once she had gotten some armor that would fit him, they headed to a tavern. While there they could get some food and look for mercenary work. Do we need to find work? Dmitri asked. Simply traveling should be able to get us the information we require. And besides that, I brought enough money to support us should we need to buy supplies or stay at an inn. He looked oddly hopeful. Byleth put down her fried fish. There are a couple of reasons. First, Gerald said he'd explain my absence by saying he sent me off to do work. If there's no word that the Ashen Demon has been taking jobs, people will become suspicious. Dmitri nodded. And the other reason? It's twofold, but it all comes down to proximity. We will be less noticeable on the road if we are working. A couple of mercenaries working or looking for work are common. Few people will look twice at us. It would also be a good excuse to give about why they were traveling without pause. It will also aid us in information gathering. When looking into what jobs are available, we might spy incidents that raise out suspicions. We will additionally be in a better position to hear rumors. I see. Dmitri smiled at her. Thank you for explaining. Dmitri and Byleth had found a job working with some of Lord Gloucester's knights. They were escorting them through some small villages on their way to an outpost. Dmitri had overheard the knights mentioning increased bandit attacks that had been going on for a while. He cannot fathom why nothing was done sooner. Even with a war going on, the citizens should be a priority. Byleth had insisted that he let her do most of the talking with their employers. Dmitri has no objections. She is better equipped to handle any business issues, and Byleth's fear that he will accidentally give something away with his words or mannerisms is reasonable. Besides, it gives him more opportunities to observe their surroundings. He especially likes it when they stop at a village for some time. Whether it be to resupply or spend the night, it is fascinating to watch the people. They might not be citizens of Faerghus, but he imagines they are similar. They are just people living their lives, the only real difference is the climate. Dmitri is fascinated by how they go about their days. The people do not have the luxuries many of the nobility do, yet have their own means to get by. Many of their methods are not as quick and easy, but they work. Even if they are not his people, seeing how happy they are to just be living their lives, brings him joy. Just the other day he saw a crowd of children walking towards the local church. Byleth had explained they were likely going for some form of education. She went on to say that most children were taught basic reading and writing at local churches while their parents were working. The children had all looked so happy and excited. It was wonderful to witness. Not everything Dmitri sees pleases him though. Many of the people are still struggling, and the knights they are accompanying were not making it any easier. He has seen many of them demanding products and items from merchants and farmers alike, without paying for them. When the inns are not suitable enough, or there isn't one at all, some of the higher-ranking knights have gone to people's houses and ordered those living in them to give up their beds for the night. Such instances made him furious, and Byleth had to stop him from intervening. Dimitri knows she was correct to do so. His beloved is smart and has a much cooler head than him. Not only would his interference likely result in no change, but it would bring about unnecessary tensions and attention for them. Not all the knights are participating in the abhorrent behavior, and a fair number of them seem as bothered as he feels. Most of the knights who are causing trouble for the citizens are older too, so such behavior might be a holdover from the previous generation. Which makes sense, for all that they were not friends, he cannot imagine Lawrence condoning this kind of behavior. Another boon is the time he spends with Byleth. It is unspeakably wonderful to spend all day, every day with her. As mercenary partners they even sleep near each other, their bedrolls typically placed together. She is just as he remembered her. Byleth's daily habits haven't changed, and she still takes joy in the same things. Just sitting with her as they eat and watching her smile is amazing to behold. As the knights believe it is not their responsibility to feed the two of them, Dimitri will sometimes go hunting for them. Seeing her excitement at whatever he brings back is indescribably gratifying. It feels so good to finally have even small ways to help her. While Dimitri is not adept at the activity himself, it is also nice to simply sit with her as she fishes for them. When they are not actively working, they are typically sparing or wandering the area together. He is unbelievably lucky to simply be with her, and he can barely contain his joy. Byleth still holds herself at a distance, but she does not avoid him. If they are sufficiently out of earshot of others, she will even share the things the goddess is saying to her. While still guarded, Byleth seems to be gradually softening. Giving more of her small, mesmerizing smiles, participating in non-work-related discussions, and sometimes he catches her looking at him and it makes his heart race. To avoid accidentally being overheard, neither has brought up the current state of their relationship. It is a reasonable precaution, however. Dimitri intends to test the waters again after their job is done and they resume traveling alone. When they return after the 5 moons are up, it is his desperate hope that his beloved will be open to the idea of having her mercenary band as part of his forces instead of Edelgard's. One of his mistakes in the beginning was only trying to have her join him. By doing so, he was putting her father and the others she worked with at risk. There was no way she would ever have agreed to that, so he subsequently changed his approach. When she refuses his requests, it is usually accompanied by Byleth stating her desire for him to eventually find happiness. She has to still love him. Byleth wouldn't be as pained as she seems to be otherwise. Dimitri just needs to make her believe that her future happiness was important as well. Dimitri firmly believes that she deserves it so much more than a wretch like him ever could. Chapter 10, Forest of Beasts. They eventually arrive at the outpost with the knights. Once Byleth retrieved their pay, she and Dimitri move on. They accept several more jobs as they travel, though after seeing how much Dimitri enjoyed the ones where they directly helped the citizens of Leicester, she tried to exclusively take those over others when she could. For all that he seems so similar to how he was before, there are definite changes in his behavior. The most prominent that Byleth noticed was that he seemed colder. It was subtle at first, especially since he is always eager when speaking with her, but it is in how he holds himself and talks with others. Dimitri is also more guarded than she remembers him being. She's had to keep a careful eye on him, as Byleth is no longer certain her predictions of his actions will be accurate. If she hadn't been watchful while they were still with the knights, Byleth is certain Dimitri would have attacked them. That would not have been a good thing. Their current job has them culling the numbers of demonic beasts that keep coming out of a forest in Edmund Lands. As well-paying as the job is, Byleth cannot help but find the situation odd. From what she could gather, this area was always swamped with demonic beasts. The forest was apparently crawling with them, and they would periodically come out to attack people. According to the locals, there was no pattern or apparent cause of the attacks. They would just happen at seemingly random intervals. Byleth could remember this area. This is where she, Marianne, and some of the others traveled to when that crest scholar was harassing the poor girl. They fought the wandering beast whom the two of them were almost certain was Maurice. What exactly happened to him they never found out, but Byleth had always wondered. If Maurice was associated with the 10 elites and Nemesis, she cannot help but question whether he knew the origins of his crest or not. Why did he turn into a beast when it didn't happen to any of the others? Why indeed? She knows that Edelgard used people in the previous war to create her demonic beasts. Byleth never learned the exact method, not that she cared to, but she knows it was basically done by combining a living being with a crest stone. So, it's possible something similar happened to Maurice. If so, he's spent around 1,000 years or so in that form. I cannot help but pity him, to live as a monster when he was once a man. Regardless of his actions, he had a life and a family. It must be agony to know they are long gone, all while his mind has been deteriorating. That was true. He wasn't terribly lucid when they fought. Maurice attacked because he was compelled to, not out of any real desire. He seemed more relieved than anything when he died and left Marianne a so-called hero's relic. That also leaves the influx of demonic beasts in the area. An influx that is so commonplace that I suspect a connection. Marianne's family is from around here, are they not? Maybe Maurice's presence was what was causing all the demonic beasts to be here. Byleth couldn't be sure, but there were a lot of them when they originally found the former human. Nevertheless, she and Dimitri are here to do a job. That is what they should be focusing on. Byleth was surveying the area while she watched Dimitri dispatch a giant bird. It looks like they killed all the others, but they'd been surprised before. "Beloved," Dimitri called. Byleth felt herself tense. She'd asked him more than once not to call her that. While we have certainly been busy, it does not feel as though we are making progress. He looked at their surroundings. No matter how many we kill, more keep coming. What happens when we leave after we get paid? Dimitri and his bleeding heart. This is not a new problem for the locals. The attacks always die down, and while it might not feel like it, we have been thinning the numbers. We face less of them every day. It was a noticeable decrease too. If it comes to it, more mercenaries will be hired. We aren't the only ones currently working in the area. Dimitri looked so dejected. I realize that, but still, he approached her and placed his hands on her shoulders. Is there not something we could do? Anything that could help more than simply culling numbers? Byleth groaned. Why did he have to be so? I do have one idea. Why is she doing this? They are on a schedule, and they haven't gotten near Shamhala yet. We could get answers to our questions. It shouldn't take us too far out of our way. Dimitri immediately light up. Really? What would you suggest we do? Before I tell you, you need to promise me that we will be discreet about it. They cannot afford to attract any attention. Of course, you have my word. He was beaming at her now. I will follow whatever instructions you give. If we wait until our contract has ended, we can make it look like we've left the area. Dimitri's smile drops a bit. Byleth had a feeling he wouldn't like that part. We can then sneak back in and go into the forest directly. Whatever is causing everything is probably in there. They can't afford to explore for too long, but hopefully going in for even a night will satisfy Dimitri. They'll need to stock up on supplies though. Who knows what they'll find, but given the number of demonic beasts they've been fighting, there is bound to be much more beyond the tree line. Dimitri pulls her into an embrace. Thank you so much, beloved. Byleth sighed. At least he's happy. They're going to need a lot of vulneraries and concoctions, and lances with the way Dimitri has been going through them. Dimitri didn't like the idea of waiting, but he had promised his beloved, so he held his tongue. They spend more time fighting the demonic beasts that come out of the forest until their contract is up. He loathes the idea of leaving, even if they are going to return once nightfall hits. Riding away from the area is difficult for him, but Byleth insisted that they needed to refrain from attracting attention as much as possible. If word got out that they went into the forest and managed to find the root of the demonic beast problem, attention would be the least of what they would get. Dimitri understands her worries. The Ashen Demon isn't known to be a hero, and it would only be a matter of time before he was recognized if people looked too closely. Still, it feels uncomfortably like he's abandoning the people, even if it is only for a few hours at most. He knows that what's been happening is not an unusual event. There are knights and mercenaries keeping the people safe, and for all that he acts flippant, Claude would never just let the citizens rot. Dmitri just wishes that more could be done than waiting a few hours before hopefully finding the source of the unrest. What good is he if he cannot save everyone? It's going to be fine, Dmitri. He appreciates Byleth trying to reassure him, but he still feels guilty. It's only going to be a few hours while we leave the horses somewhere safe and walk back. We took breaks before, this is no different. It feels different. Before they were still in the area in case something happened. I suppose. I get that you're upset, Dmitri, really I do, but this is getting ridiculous. Byleth stops her horse and stares at him. You cannot be everywhere or save everyone. We are already going above and beyond, stop beating yourself up about this. It will get you nowhere and only cause unnecessary pain. I know. Do you really? She cuts him off. Anytime you feel like you're failing, you act like this. It is not healthy. I know. Byleth shakes her head. Then act like it. You keep throwing yourself into the fire for others without a care for yourself, but there are people who care about you. If you care so damn much, think about them for a change. Before he could answer, Byleth looked forward again and sped up her horse. They rode in silence after that. Byleth refused to talk with him even as they left the horses at an inn and walked back the way they came. It was maddening to be so close to her, but still have walls between them. This isn't even like the normal walls she raises. Usually, Byleth's coldness towards him comes from her efforts to protect them both from what she believes the future has in store for them. Right now, she is furious with him. How can he make it right if she won't speak with him? Beloved, please, just talk with me. Byleth wouldn't even look at him. There's nothing to say. But, beloved. I've asked you not to call me that. Her voice was sharp. If we talk, you'll offer me useless platitudes about how you are sorry about upsetting me, and while that's all well and good, it will not solve anything. If talking has no point, I don't wish to participate. Dmitri feels terrible. He knows that Byleth has never cared for his self-depreciation and what she used to refer to as his savior complex. She did not complain about his desire to help others, but often worried when he became overzealous. He supposed it made sense. Dmitri frequently worried about Byleth doing too much, taking on too much work or responsibility. It was different for him though. Dmitri was raised for this, it was what he was meant to do. His crest did not give him monstrous strength and stamina for nothing. He just wants them to stop, he can't even confidently call what they are doing fighting. Dmitri just knows that Byleth is upset with him, and he wants to make her happy again. We are doing as the boy asked. I don't see why he must continue beating himself up about a few measly hours. Byleth did not understand either. She just knew she found the entire thing annoying. Saving people was a noble goal and all, but going in with the mindset of, I must save everyone, was just asking for heartbreak. You'd think after everything you've both been through, that he'd stop being so self-destructive. Maybe he should focus on himself for a little while before he goes back to pursuing you romantically. A break from it all would be nice. By the way, Byleth, why haven't you mentioned Maurice to the boy yet? She doesn't see a reason to. Especially considering how Dmitri reacted when she told him the true origins of crests. He doesn't need that on his mind right now. Byleth. Fine. Dmitri, she said, catching her morose companion's attention. There's another reason we should look into the forest. What would that be? Dmitri sounded confused. I've been here before. During the last war, Marianne was being harassed by some crest scholar. It was rather unsettling that he was able to just walk into the monastery. He'd apparently been practically stalking her for ages and accused her of being a monster. I remember Marianne being such a nice girl. How could anyone call her a monster? Byleth shrugged. I didn't understand it either. So, we came here to investigate and clear Marianne's name. We fought many demonic beasts and, Maurice. He and Marianne share a crest, so he left her a hero's relic to use. I'm sure you must have seen Bloodgong, at least in passing. She heard Dmitri stop walking and turned to face him. Dmitri was staring at her with wide eyes. Do you mean the same Maurice as the one from the War of Heroes? He approached her and frantically grabbed her arms. Yes. How is this possible? How could you have seen Maurice? He should be long dead. The elites were long-lived, but not that long. I don't know. Byleth tried to gently remove Dimitri's hands from her arms, but his grip was too strong. I'm not even completely sure that Marianne and I were correct about our assumption. All I know is what our theory was and that the wandering beast might be able to answer some of our questions. Dimitri looked confused for a moment. Why don't I remember coming here before? Such an important mission wouldn't have been kept from me. That's because everything happened when you were unapproachable to most. She looked away. No one told you about it because it was unrelated to the war, and you weren't exactly open to talking with anyone. Oh, this happened while I was behaving like a monster. Dimitri's expression grew dark. Byleth was finally able to remove Dimitri's trembling hands from her arms and clasped them in her own. Take a deep breath. She knew this was a bad idea. Dimitri was already worked up enough with his self-worth issues. Being reminded of the time in his life when he was practically feral was not helping. We will go into the forest and find Maurice. We can try to ask him questions and hopefully also find a way to deal with all the demonic beasts. She raised one of her hands to cup the side of his face. Dimitri closed his eyes and leaned into her hold. If her touch comforted him, then she would freely give it. They were both tense and her anger and annoyance with Dimitri hadn't helped matters. Are you ready to continue going now? Dimitri nodded. Yes, though if I'm any, I would like to keep holding hands. He stopped as a blush overtook his face. It even reached his ears. It was kind of adorable. Very adorable indeed. That really wasn't helping. We certainly don't have to if it makes you uncomfortable, Dimitri frantically continues. It's just getting rather dark, and I'd prefer that we not accidentally get separated. If the forest is swarming with demonic beasts like you said, such a thing could prove deadly. Byleth seriously doubts that is the reason, but she could still humor him. That does seem like a reasonable request. Dimitri's grasp on her hand tightens and his blush somehow intensifies. That's great. Let's be off then. Why is he so embarrassed? They've held hands before, he can remember kissing her, this should be nothing. They are walking through a forest full of demonic beasts, hoping to find one of the first humans to ever bear a crest. He clearly has more important things to focus on. Instead, he's worrying about Byleth feeling how sweaty his palms are and reveling in her touch. Any physical contact they'd had has been minimal, with Byleth always pulling away much too soon. Now she's allowing it and it's all he can think about. Suddenly the atmosphere changes. Everything around them becomes unnaturally quiet and even the wind seems to disappear. Something is coming. Dimitri doesn't know what it is, but it must be powerful to cause such stillness. The scariest things do not cause their prey to run, they cause them to be paralyzed in terror. For something to cause nature itself to have such a reaction. Be ready to draw a weapon but wait to do so. If he's willing to talk, I want to give him the chance. Byleth's hand went to her sword's hilt. Last time Maurice didn't seem to be completely in control of himself. He attacked because he was overcome, not because he felt malice towards us. Dimitri could relate. He is well aware of his tendency to lose himself on the battlefield. He still remembers his violent reaction when Solon attacked Byleth and when Edelgard's Flame Emperor mask broke. For now, as flushed as he feels, he can take comfort in feeling his beloved's hand in his. Tense as the atmosphere is, she appears steady and calm. Dimitri can take strength from her stability and the knowledge that the two of them can take down any obstacle when they are together. The fact that the goddess is with them through Byleth is also a comfort. Then the ground began to shake and heavy breathing filled the air. Dimitri whipped his head towards the sound and found a large beast staring down at them. It reminded Dimitri a lot of what Miklon turned into after he stole the Lance of Ruin when Byleth was still his professor. This one might be bigger though, and its hide was covered in broken-off weapons. It had clearly seen many battles. Yet it had not made any attempts at attacking them. Not yet at least. Then it did something Dimitri was not expecting, despite all that Byleth had told him before. No, he spoke. You both carry familiar scents. Why is that? Check the description for the links to the author.